Hey everyone, welcome back to Let Me Tell You Why That's Bullshit. Today we're talking tariffs. Yes, again, because apparently we're all living inside a parody where economic policy is decided with a cardboard chart, a ChatGPT prompt, and the strategic depth of a toddler playing Monopoly. Spoiler alert, the toddler just bought Boardwalk and nuked the economy. We're going to break down how Trump's retaliatory tariffs are neither retaliatory nor smart, unless you think jacking up prices on goods from penguin-inhabited islands is a power move. You know it's going well when the financial markets react like someone just screamed recession in a crowded theater. Bonds become radioactive, and Americans can't afford cars. But hey, at least they might get to build factories no one can plan for, staffed by workers they deported. Awesome. We'll get into the nonsense around manufacturing, the auto industry chaos, the Nintendo Switch 2 drama, because yes, even Mario's got beef with tariffs now, and how these policies are about as well thought out as a TikTok conspiracy. Also, if we feel like it and we have the time, we're going to go over 2 executive orders, banishing former staffers, and what happens when a small Texas town that voted Trump in by 40 points realizes ICE came for their neighbors. We're going on a ride through economic gaslighting, geopolitical tantrums, and the kind of policymaking that would get you kicked out of a model UN. Let's get into it.
We have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now.
Okay. Rio, how are you today?
I'm okay. I forgot to mention this before. Well, I forgot to mention this before we hopped on. I got my response from you, Vic, about my application, and I got rejected there. But it doesn't matter because I got accepted to my first choice program anyway. So
I was about to say, way to dox yourself. And then I remembered, oh, you're not going to UVic. He's not doxing himself.
Not going to UVic at all. So yeah, suck it, UVic.
Whatever. They took a professor in that teaches there. You know that one that I had all the drama with Yeah. He teaches there. So you're better off.
Yeah.
You're better off. Who needs Victoria? Although that would have been a nice place to live in.
It was online program, so I'd still be stuck.
Well, so you don't even get that benefit?
Yeah, I'd still be stuck in Alberta. So
fuck that nonsense. Well, I had nothing new this week except for following tariffs.
Yep.
So let's talk about tariffs. Frankie, sorry, my dog is not letting me. No, I didn't take her to the dog park today, so she's super wound up.
Sad.
Yeah, you might find her bouncing around in the background or her head popping up now. Yeah, so let's talk about tariffs. Let's kind of go through first, if you're okay with it, just sort of the timeline of what happened this week. So Trump announced on April 2nd, their Liberation Day, basically the biggest tax increase on Americans in history. He stood in front of the press. Did you see that stupid cardboard giant ass Monopoly piece that he was using to explain these tariffs he imposed? Now, he called them retaliatory tariffs, which is not the case. He wasn't putting retaliatory tariffs on because other countries were tariffing them. He's been obsessed with this trade deficit stuff, which we can get into if you want later. But basically, if they had a trade deficit with a country, he would impose these tariffs that he's calling retaliatory tariffs. Yep. Now, one of the ones that came into the news this week was, and I don't know how this happened. They probably ChatGPT'd which countries to tariff to. They tariffed an island that only has penguins living on it. It's not inhabited by humans. So the conspiracy theorist in me would like to know what these penguins are selling to the world.
Yeah.
And then he's tariffing. And I know this probably seems okay, well, why are we focusing on it? We're focusing on it because he's a moron.
Yeah. And how do you how do you like, have like every country in the world and just be like, you know what, fuck these penguins, they're not paying enough money.
I mean,
Or like,
penguins are really mean though.
yeah, but like clearly these
Maybe
penguins
they
are like major
maybe they
economic
deserve it.
actors, right?
Maybe they just like fucked with the wrong fish. Maybe
Yeah.
they ate Trump's like pet fish at one point. Who knows? So this caused the markets to lose like $6 trillion after he announced this, which they were already like losing money before. And then did you see this? Okay, so Trump then later in the week tweeted or whatever. What's the equivalent of like you tweet and that's on Twitter. What do you do on Truth Social? Is it like a truthy or a falsy? So he falsy like tweeted that now would be a really good time to buy money on the stock market. And then 3 hours later, he announced the 90-day pause on tariffs and the market skyrocketed and regained like something like 2,000 points. Bonds also crashed around the same time, deemed too risky, which can obviously cause a global financial crisis because people were selling them off. Analysts are convinced that this is why Trump got spooked. And when asked about it, Trump said that everybody was getting yippy, that was his term he used, yippy, about stocks and bonds. So basically admitting like, yeah, it was bonds. This caused the Democrats to call for an investigation for basically insider trading, or I guess like public insider trading, because he was like, everybody should buy stocks.
Yeah. It's clearly like acting on information, right? And like, I also just want to mention, because I keep seeing this shit on Instagram because it's really fucking stupid, like the amount of people that are like, oh yeah, biggest gain in a single day, but overall the market's still down like 25%.
Congratulations, you fixed the emergency you caused.
Yeah, but like the market's still down like 25%. Oh, yeah. I can tell you that like none of my accounts are where they were 4 months ago.
No,
right?
mine are all down 20%.
Yeah, thanks, Trump.
Right? I mean, luckily we're young, and so we have like 30 years to recover our shit.
Yeah.
But like, if you're a boomer, I hope you moved your stuff out in January.
Yeah, right.
I know my in-laws did because they were smart, and also I was like, move your stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is insane. So Democrats are calling for that. And even though he paused tariffs, they left this like 10% blanket global tariff in place. And they also, one of his like advisors this week said that that's not going anywhere regardless. So like, there's still going to be a global tariff in place, even if they make these deals. And then Fox News, I should say state media, kept talking about how like, this is awesome, the art of the deal, and he's going to get such great deals with other countries. Meanwhile, then they like escalated their war with China because Trump imposed another tariff on China. And then China was basically like, hey, get fucked. And then they put a tariff on the US. And then Trump went on and posted a falsie. I'm just going to call them falsies. He posted a falsie on Truth Social. That name makes me laugh. Stating that if China didn't remove their retaliatory tariff in 24 hours, they would impose another tariff. Anyway, so in short, China now has 145% tariff on. Trump says it's 125%, but he can't actually do math, or they forgot about all the other tariffs they put on China. So it is 145% that the US has on China, and China has 125% on the US.
Yep.
So, fun times there.
Yeah. Everything made in China all of a sudden just got twice as expensive. Like, love it.
It's kind of crazy. So, comments? Where do you want to start with this?
I mean,
I guess we could start actually. Here's a good place to start. So let's talk about like where tariffs kind of like were. So before Trump came in, US tariffs were around 3%. Biden did leave on some Trump tariffs on China for obvious reasons. Now, today, after he removed all of, put those 90-day pauses on, we're looking at a 24% across the board tariff with a 10% global blanket tariff. So the American people are looking at 24% of additional tariffs, on their, so this would be things they're importing, right? So 24% of the things they're importing have additional tariffs.
Yep.
And then there's also this blanket 10% global tariff. And then Kevin Hassett, Trump's top economic advisor, went on Fox News. I'm not even going to call it that. They went on Fox and said that the global tariffs aren't going to go anywhere. Yeah. And of course, they're still arguing about how this is going to bring manufacturing back to the US. So maybe we can talk about why that's a terrible idea. Or what do you think? Where do you want to go with this?
All right. So first, I just want to mention this. I wanted to make sure I get the numbers right when I mentioned this.
Good job.
In 2024, China exported an estimated $582.4 billion to the U.S., and U.S. good exports to China were $143.5 billion. Right. So basically everything's got hugely more expensive, and as a percentage of GDP, I don't want to do the math, and that seems like a lot of work to do for the next 5 minutes. So I'd rather not.
It's bad.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that it's bad, right? The US is a net importer. It's kind of always been a net importer. When you have 400 million people that consume the most on the planet,
which is why they have a trade deficit, because they're richer and they buy more crap.
Exactly, right? And if you have money, which the United States does, because being the global economic powerhouse and the global reserve currency kind of give you that power to do whatever you want.
Which Trump's blowing up.
Yeah, which Trump is blowing up. I don't know why anyone would want the US dollar after 4 years of this.
But that's kind of what people are talking about right now, right? You have so the global order, this is actually a great kind of thing to chat about real quick. Yeah. The US created this global order after World War II. If we look at Ukraine as an example, the US convinced the Ukraine by to get rid of their nuclear program and their nukes, saying don't worry, we got you.
Yeah.
That's basically what they said to everybody in the world. And they have benefited an insane amount by having a global order with the US at the center of it. They've basically had their say on world issues. Yep. Their currency is the reserve currency of the world. Yep. This is all in jeopardy now. They've pissed off Europe, NATO, which no longer exists really, other than on paper. They're befriending the Russians. Germany wants nukes again. Poland is go Germany, which, by the way, let's all take a moment to realize that Poland is now totally fine with Germany having nukes.
Yeah, right?
They've gotten over their shit now. We are really in a stark shift of the last,
really stark shift in policy over the last 80 years, huh?
Right? So that's one piece of this.
Yeah. And so Trump doing this is all just combative, right? And that's starting a trade war is a type of war. Let's just get that out there right now.
Oh, 100%.
And it's not supporting your people and doing what you want to do, or what he said he's going to do. We're going to talk more about this later, of trying to lower prices, because you literally just doubled prices, or more than doubled prices, on everything coming in from China, which is about $500 billion worth of goods, right? Yeah. And when your GDP is just about 40 trillion, that's not a small number. That's a really big percentage of your GDP still. And it's not, really at the end of the day, it's just not a smart policy to go after, because what the world depends on, we've talked about this before, is those it's an interconnected global economy, right? Whether we like it or not, things have globalized and things are different now. So you can't just, pull manufacturing back into your country, and we can talk more about the CHIPS Act and stuff later, because we also have notes on that. You can't just pull that back in your country and assume everything's going to be hunky-dory, because you're the net importer of the world. You are the one who has to buy the world's products. And as much money as the EU, Canada, the rest of the G7 or the G20 have, combined, it's still barely the entirety of the United States, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all this tariff stuff is just really nonsense. And I stand by this, even though the market can recover like in one day, and have a significant gain. That doesn't change the fact that
It's
the market's still down
20%.
25% since the start of the year, right?
Yeah, since Trump took over.
Yeah,
but also, for me, even if he recovered, let's say, for argument's sake, that by the end of this 90 days, the markets are back to where they were when he came into office.
Yeah.
You don't get credit for fixing the emergency you caused.
Yep.
That would be like an arsonist being like, actually, no. Okay, I'm not even going to use that. I'm going to use the example that Pod Save America gave in one of their newsletters. I can't remember who wrote the article, but they basically said that even if the markets bounce back the full 25% by the end of this 90 days, it would be like if George Bush turned around and instead of invading Iraq, gave the terrorists a freedom medal. Yeah. You don't get credit. You don't get credit for this.
Yeah.
It's all ass backwards.
Yeah. If you cause the problem, you don't get credit for fixing the problem.
Right?
That's
it's
you doing your job.
That burns shit down and then they put out their fire and they're like, well, your house is still standing. You started the fire.
Yeah. I totally saved the day. Did you though?
It's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
But then the other piece of this is Trump seems to be caught, and this has been something that people are finally talking about this week, in the mainstream media. People on podcasts have been talking about this since January.
Yeah.
He seems to be stuck in this 1930s through 70s factory jobs being amazing thing and needing to bring back manufacturing to the US. But because we're globalized and because we have technology, here's the thing. Here's the first thing. US companies can't plan to build factories right now.
Yep.
Why? Because Trump is a fucking lunatic. One day you have tariffs. The next day he's pausing said tariffs for 90 days. Meanwhile, while he's doing that, he has idiots from his regime going on TV, as an example, and saying, oh no, Canada will have an additional 10% tariff. And then 2 hours later, Caroline Leavitt comes out, the Secretary of Communication, and says, no, he was mistaken. Canada won't have the 10% tariff. They're just getting the global tariff. So that's still in place. So they're causing confusion all over the place. You can't fucking plan for that. Why would Apple move shit back not being able to plan for that? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that takes so long. That's a 5-year kind of pathway to actually build those factories.
Yeah.
Third, if we look at the US manufacturing that is available now, there's actually the Bulwark did some great reporting on this week. There's actually a worker shortage on factories they already have because people don't want those jobs.
Yeah.
They're not actually good paying jobs anymore, Trump.
Yeah.
When they were good paying, it was because factory workers were unionized.
Yep.
Something you fucking hate, by the way. Fourth, if Apple did move their factories back to the US, and they actually, fun fact, I didn't know this. Rob, my husband, was telling me about this. Apple did experiment with having, you could opt to buy products that were made in North America.
Yep.
They just cost more.
Yep.
Guess who bought those products? No one. Because they costed way more.
Yep.
And now, in today's world, if, let's say, Apple managed to pop up a factory tomorrow, analysts did the math on this. An iPhone would now cost $3,500 USD. Are you paying $3,500 USD for a fucking Apple phone?
Nope. Okay, I'm not, to be fair, my most recent phone, I had the choice of like, okay, I could go for like the
I know, you're
Samsung
cheap.
S20, or I could go for the Google Pixel 7, and the price difference was $20, like 20. No, it was $37 a month for the S20 and $12 a month for the Pixel 7. And I was like, $12 a month for 2 years sounds pretty solid. I'm gonna go do that.
Rob did the exact same thing, except it was at Christmas time and he was outright buying the phone.
Yep.
And he was like, the Pixel's slightly cheaper. That's what I'm getting.
Exactly. And then like that's literally where I ended up. Because I'm like, all right, cheaper phone. And like I'm pretty sure it was like manufactured like somewhere in like if not China, Taiwan.
100%, right?
Yeah. So like I mean, I'd
people-
rather pay $800 for a phone than $3,500.
right? Like people don't want to pay for that. And then Lutnick and all of his fucking smarts, I guess, went on Fox this week too and was talking about like how they're going to bring great jobs back, like screwing in the little tiny ass screws that. So I learned this week from David Froome. These Apple phones,
Yeah.
I guess they have like two main screws underneath somewhere
Yeah.
that are kind of like the core of holding them together. And so like they do have like people that like screw these in. Now, I also didn't know this, but he was explaining about like how screws are actually made and how that's like basically like a skill because they're made from like little pieces of wire that are like shaped and then covered in nickel, specifically nickel for iPhones, but it could be like stainless steel and other things. And then they take another piece of wire and like make the head top bit.
Yep.
Then they screw it in.
Yep.
Nobody's doing that in America. Nobody is doing that job. Anyway, you were clearly excited about saying something.
Yeah, because I saw a really funny. So this is actually put out by Chinese government for obvious reasons. Take this with a grain of salt, right? But they didn't like they released an ad of like, yeah, this is what the new manufacturing jobs look like in America. We should like do this to China. And it was literally just a bunch of like, stereotypical overweight American people sitting at like sewing machines,
I saw
sewing
that!
underwear or like, screwing stuff in and like,
Oh my God.
and like, that's it. Right. And I was
I
like,
wondered what that was because I saw like the still of it somewhere and I was like, this is weird, but I didn't click on it because I was tired and I wanted to go to bed.
yeah,
That's amazing.
I'll see if I can find it. I'll send you the link after. But like, it was like I saw that and I was literally sitting there with like my morning coffee like the day before I went into the office, and I was like, huh, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty like, I don't want to say that's a pretty accurate representation, but like that is kind of how it comes across, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
that's
also,
amazing.
well, I want to mention too, because like it's sweatshop labor. Like that's what you get when you're buying shit from China. That's why it's piss cheap. Like that's why you can buy like a toy made in China at Walmart for like $12. But if that same toy was made in America, it'd be like 46. Because like you're paying maybe pennies for the person's labor and like even less for the materials. But if you want to do that job here in America and get paid basically minimum wage, and then all of a sudden everything costs like triple, like congratulations, the thing you're now making now costs you 4 hours of your own work, right? As opposed to that thing you were like buying made in China before, $12 doll as an example. Like you could have bought that with like 2 hours of your own work at minimum wage. Now you have to do it for like 6-7 hours, right? So like if you think about it from that other side of it, where Christmas as an easy example, where it's like things that matter to like your families and kids and like giving each other presents and like those kinds of celebrations, there's that cost there, right? So yeah, I mean, the idea that manufacturing is like the way to go moving forward is wrong. Like, and like I mentioned before, like with such a globalized like economy, you really can't do that these days, and especially when you're depending on cheap Chinese labor, right?
Yeah, and there's like a way to do it properly. So this is great because now we can talk about the CHIPS Act, because this was something that Biden put in place to try to get more of the chips like manufactured in the US.
Yeah.
The difference being that chips, this is like in the realm of technology.
Yeah.
Costs more, the jobs are different. And here's the thing, it was working.
Yeah.
Like it was working. And now Trump, this is the thing that I don't understand. Trump wants to tear apart the CHIPS Act. Like he wants to get rid of it.
Yep.
Which has brought manufacturing back to the US.
Yep.
While claiming that he wants to bring manufacturing back to the US. So I'm going to let you rant about this because I know that you had like a ton of notes
Yep.
on the Chip Act and
Yeah.
the idiocy that is happening.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with just like some numbers, because who doesn't love numbers? So to start with, Japan has the most fabrication plants in the world. They have 103, and they produce more than 50% of the materials and 30% of the equipment you need for semiconductor production. Taiwan by itself makes 50% of the global chips and semiconductor market, and they only have 80 fabrication plants, which is huge. The United States has 95 plants. They comprise 12% of global manufacturing capacity, but they make up 40% or 46% of the global sales. So like 46% of all chips sold in the world go to the United States. And like, so that's like, those are the numbers. And then I also just made sure to pull this up because I wanted to talk a little bit about like salaries. It's actually like we're talking about jobs in manufacturing. And this is from payscale.com. The average like salary in US for like, if you're in semiconductor chip manufacturing is $102,000 a year. Now that ranges from like, those are various engineering level jobs and like.
And that's USD, right?
Yeah, and that's USD. And like, there's a lot of, there are a lot of different parts to all of this, right? So the first job that comes up, which I'm just assuming is like related to the actual manufacturing process, because it's called process engineer, is process engineer. Your range is typically starting at 70K, high point of 127 with an average of 86,000. Like,
so in other words, this is a good manufacturing job.
Yeah, it's a really good manufacturing job. And then if you even look at like some of the other jobs too, like if you're an electrical or a software engineer as well, obviously you're making more, right?
Right.
Or like if you're one of the guys who's maintaining the machines, obviously you're making more because it's more specialized work, right? And like,
so what you're saying is that Trump wants to get rid of the good factory job where people are, it's probably going to average out to like making 100K because it's like, skilled labor, versus Apple jobs that will be like $9 an hour.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, so it's really highly skilled labor that's, really technical and in really high demand, right? Like I just mentioned, the United States makes up 46%. Yeah, 46% of chips in the world go to the United States, right? So if you're doing that like domestically, all of a sudden you have a more competitive edge in the world, because now you don't have to worry about like, say China invades Taiwan, Taiwan decides like, we can't maintain the defense anymore. We're just going to blow up all, 80 of our factories. Suck it, China. What are you going to do about it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what China really wants, is the manufacturing capacity that Taiwan has. And like, obviously that's a last resort strategy, but like the Taiwanese...
What's been talked about though? That's been in the news for a couple of years now.
Oh yeah, and like the Taiwan like defense doctrine is super interesting, because I decided to read about it when I started hearing about that. It's the porcupine, right?
Yeah.
Literally, they just have one super fortified. The part that's facing China is like super fortified, and like it's a really long stretch of ocean that like no one wants to cross, because if you try to cross it now, it's basically just getting hammered by missiles, artillery, and bullets, like for the foreseeable future. You're not getting through that, and like. It's easy to say like, well, China has the biggest military, biggest navy, but keep in mind that the D-Day invasion took, way more ships than China has to cross a channel that's way shorter than the distance between Taiwan and mainland China, right? And on top of that, there's like a fucking cliffs. I'm pretty sure it's on the China facing side where you also have to deal with the cliffs. You have to scale to get into Taiwan proper, right? Like, and you're not.
In other words, it's worse than the Normandy beaches.
Exactly. And like the high ground meme from like Star Wars, it's true for a reason. If you're shooting downwards, you're going to have a much easier time than the guy shooting up. So, but anyway, that's defense and security stuff for later. But
it's important, right? Like, because that doesn't just fuck China, it fucks the world. Like, you want to talk about chip shortages during COVID?
Oh yeah, and like that's the other
nothing.
Yeah, and like because I remember
it took us 2 years to get our dishwasher, like, and we had to like pay for our dishwasher, and then literally it was sitting in a warehouse completely built. It was missing one chip during COVID. I had to hand wash dishes, Rio, because the dishwasher broke. 2 years I didn't do dishwasher.
My friend was getting
and yes, that's a total like first world problem, but.
But like
it's the thing, right?
Yeah. And actually it's funny you mentioned that too, because I just remembered when I got my car. So at the time it was when I first ordered it, it was like November of 2020.
I remember this.
It
Yeah.
was like October, November 2022, and it didn't get here until March 2023, right? And
Yeah, because
like,
I started working with you after you ordered it, and you didn't get it for like a year.
yeah, and I was just like, I guess I'm just gonna sit here for a while and just like continue to drive my shitty little beater of an Impreza, and like it got me where I needed to go. It wasn't comfortable, and the AC didn't work, and sometimes it just stalled in the middle of the road. But like, it took a long time for me to get my car, and I was like, well, guess I'm just chilling, right? And and I also just remember this too, because I rebuilt my PC like not long before I ordered my car, and like, at the time, what was it? I had a old NVIDIA 1660 like graphics card, and like when I first bought it, it was like pre-COVID, it was like maybe $350-$400, like super cheap. That same graphics card, like when I was like, okay, well, if I'm looking at rebuilding, maybe I'll just like SLI 2 graphics cards and and then like I looked at that same graphics card, just like see if I could do it, and I was like, well, if I'm going to be paying $800 for a graphics card, I may as well just splurge and get a better graphics card, right?
Yeah.
So like, you're dealing with that now too. Like, well, even just consumer products get so much more expensive and so much harder to get when
The
you don't
graphics card, my new computer was crazy.
Oh yeah, and like Taiwan makes up 50%, and you're trying to build up your 12% production, and you're trying to make it more advanced too, right? Because this is the same from the same website that I got the global chip manufacturing stuff. Let me see if I can pull it up again, because here it is, worldpopulationreview.com. Taiwan actually has the most advanced chip like development stuff. So like you really can't replace Taiwan right away. And if you want to, you need to start doing it now and like make huge investments into it.
Right.
But the United States currently makes up 12% of the advanced processes market.
Which is what Biden was doing under the CHIP Act, by the way.
Exactly, right? And like you want to try and maintain a competitive edge in this, like in a world where like the world depends on semiconductors and chips. Like, you need to find a way to not depend on Taiwan. Like, sorry, Taiwan, like, I'm sorry to say that, like, that's going to kind of compromise your future security, but for now, you're the global provider, and until people can, like, wean themselves off of you, like, if something were to happen in Taiwan, basically everything's fucked.
Not that we're any better now being under the stable genius.
Yeah, I know, right?
Who's deciding that, like, I want to bring manufacturing jobs back, but I'm going to destroy this act that is literally bringing back better manufacturing jobs.
Yeah, and like really high quality manufacturing jobs that pay really well, I want to say. Because even if you're just like, lower end, like the lower end of like semiconductor manufacturing comes in at around 66,000, right? Like it's still pretty high.
Yeah. And like for our Canadian listeners, so 70K USD is $97,000 Canadian.
Yeah.
These are not like shit jobs that he's like, and then he's like destroying this act, wanting to like not bring more of those factories back, but he's going to bring back like Apple, which like, yeah, I was going to say that he's like catering to his billionaire friends, but they don't want it any more than he, like the rest of us do.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, I finally found like the most, like probably most basic job you'll get in a semiconductor manufacturing plant. Manufacturing technician, salary range 42,000 to 97,000. Your average is 71,000. Like, you're doing that with like maybe a couple of years of schooling, and like that's all work experience in the field, right?
Right.
But,
those are the manufacturing jobs you want.
Yeah, that's what you really want. But yeah. Anyway, all that is to say is sabotaging the CHIPS Act is another dumb policy, right? And it was something, the CHIPS Act was something to help the US maintain its competitive edge so that it's not depending so much on Taiwan. And especially now that like it's gone, Taiwan suddenly just became a lot more important to the rest of the world. And like all of a sudden, Taiwan now has a huge target on its fucking back too, right? Well, another huge target on its back.
So then the question becomes like, because he's shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah.
And at some point, these morons are going to realize that ChatGPT probably wasn't the way to go for their economic policies.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. Just like a side note that somebody actually thought, hey, let's go see if the stable genius just pulled this off ChatGPT. And it was like word for word. Like the formula was the same.
Yeah.
So whoever, like whatever moron made up this policy, like just ChatGPT this, that's fucking crazy to me. But so Trump right now keeps hinting at how like he's gonna make these like big ass deals with other countries. It's gonna be like art of the deal level, but you still have, he's gonna keep the auto tariffs. He wants to keep this 10% tariff. There's no clear exit ramp for him.
Yeah.
Like, does this lead to a sweep? See, this is what's concerning me, because people don't care about the administration, sorry, the regime, disappearing people, but they do give a shit about the economy.
Yeah.
So where's his like exit ramp here? Like, where is the win for him? Because the new elections are coming in 2026, like the midterms for the House and the Senate. Do people remember this a year from now? Is that why he's doing this now?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think's going to happen? Like, how does he spin this as a win for himself? I mean, I think what's going to happen is he's going to, you know, renegotiate what used to be NAFTA and whatever other
NAFTA into Kuzma into Kuzma 2.
Yeah,
like,
right?
Yeah.
Like, and then whatever treaties and trade deals he's going to come up with like Europe and shit, which like, it's not like they're going in to deal with Europe in under good terms.
Yeah.
Europe hates them right now because of all their shit. So like, how does this play out in America, and how does this play out in the midterms? But then you have on the other side of this, like, I follow like US geopolitics quite closely.
Yep.
And the Democrats aren't doing shit.
Yeah.
They're not saying anything. They don't have any plans. They've barely said anything about disappearing people because immigration was something they lost on.
Yeah.
They're not pointing out the problem with tariffs, which we'll have a case study in a few minutes here.
Yeah.
So like, what the fuck happens in the midterms? Because that's like a turning point, right? Like, that's gonna say, are we going down full authoritarianship in the US, or are we going to be able to kind of control this for the next 2 years after that?
Yeah. And like, so for me, and just kind of, I know I've mentioned this before, like we've talked about like spineless Republicans and now like spineless Democrats, right? So it's like, there's really, it seems to me that even with midterms, like people don't have short memories, but they get fatigued, right? And that seems to be the strategy, because I remember, what was it? I think it was like during Biden's election campaign too, right? Like there's just so much fatigue around like, well, who is it going to be? And like, why would Biden be a better choice versus Trump? But everyone's just so tired of Trump, right? And like, it could be that fatigue just becomes what people vote on, right? But at the same time, like if you have that, and then like you have Donald Trump out here being like, oh yeah, no, this is totally a win. Like Fox News state media, like is totally framing everything as a win. But like, you know, if the price of eggs, and my favorite Instagram page posted this a few days ago, like it peaked at like $10.99 or something like that a few days ago, but then like came back down like $7.99.
That's like $18 Canadian.
Oh yeah.
Eggs.
Then it came down to like back down like $8, and I was like, that's still a lot of money for eggs. And like, you know me, I buy 30 eggs at Costco and it cost me $11. And I was like, you know what? Best deal I'm going to get on eggs, because I can do that. Or I can spend $7 on a dozen eggs at fucking Safeway, right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. There's really, in terms of like, is there a way out? Not really, right? Because like everyone's mad at Trump. Like you're the world's biggest customer, and you just pissed off the rest of the planet. And now no one really wants to deal with you, because like, what's the point when the deal could be worthless in a week, right?
Yeah, but I guess like my question is, what do Americans do with this? Because you have 30% of the country that just like worships the Republicans regardless of what they do.
Yeah.
And then you have like the rest of the people that voted Trump that like specifically voted on the economy.
Yeah.
Because sure, like yeah, Trump was the failed businessman who managed to bankrupt a casinos who you want running your country.
Yeah.
But there has been an argument made that like the Democrats aren't really doing anything. And
Yeah.
it's so early in the term that like, do people just forget by the midterms? And I guess it kind of depends. Like if we look at the auto sector, right?
Yeah.
This week there was the I guess this month, there was the 25% tariffs on imported vehicles, which is approximately worth $108 billion.
Yep.
Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, did I say that right? Stellantis vehicles. Those are like the kind of the three like in the US, right? So they're
Right.
expected to have to bear 42 billion of those costs.
Yeah.
On average, the tariffs will add $5,000 per vehicle USD for the imported parts and 8,600 for fully imported vehicles.
Yeah.
If we look at like what's happened this week, Canada, as an example, production was halted by General Motors.
Yeah.
And there was layoffs in Ontario, like big layoffs this week. Stellantis has paused their operations in Windsor completely, which affects almost 5,000 workers.
Yep.
So like, and he said that auto tariffs are staying on. So, I mean, I suppose an exit ramp for him could be like, oops, we're going to get rid of the auto tariffs, or yeah, the auto tariffs, and hope like, I mean, if I had to take a guess, it'd be like 6 months before the midterms.
Yeah.
Because people's memories are just that short.
Yeah.
Now, if they're still on, I feel like going into the midterms, when you look at the midterms of like who's most likely to vote, it tends to be things like if there's something major going on, like,
Yeah.
you know, Trump, that'll bring out voters.
Yeah.
And then just people that are like really well connected, right? Like the midterms aren't generally, they don't lean one way or the other in terms of Republicans or Democrats, but they definitely like, you don't have as big of a turnout as you do for like a presidential election.
Yeah.
So I guess I just kind of look at the US and I'm like, what the fuck, guys?
Yeah. Like, what do you do now? Because like, we're already seeing like, if he was talking about bringing back like especially auto manufacturing jobs, right? Basically just, you know, let's bring back Detroit, as if that's ever going to work. And
which
then,
he's talking about.
Yeah, which he's talking about, like he's literally had the opposite effect now. Like auto manufacturing jobs are suffering. Like, so how can you, I don't understand how people can like look at this and be like, wow, yeah, he totally did the thing. But then that's the problem too, right? Is that because people have such a short memory, and like maybe it's different between Canada and the United States, because Chantal Hebert I saw her on CBC this morning.
Her.
Yeah, she's amazing, like amazing person. And like she was saying, it's like, you know, Canadians don't have a short memory, but they get fatigued with issues. And that's why like people tend to vote like less on like what they remember and more on just like, oh, I'm so fucking tired of hearing about this, right? And
well,
like,
that's why Danielle Smith keeps saying like, could we stop talking about Trump so that Poilievre can win?
yeah, or like, can we stop talking, like, even not that, can we stop talking about Alberta corrupt care, right? You know?
Guys, stop telling people I'm corrupt.
Yeah, stop telling people the truth about me. It's making me look bad.
And I guess that's the thing, right? So maybe this is a good time to talk about the Nintendo Switch too.
Yeah.
Because I think the difference between Trump's first term, because if you, so I follow the Bulwark, as everybody knows by now.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about that network, I guess, if you want to call it that podcast network, is Sarah Longwell, who's part owner of the Bulwark. She does, as I've talked about before, focus groups with people. And one of the things that came out like in the lead up to the election was people had like fond memories of Trump's economy during his first term. Now we can get into the like divots of how like he actually just inherited that economy from Obama and managed to not tank it as badly. And it was so good that it kind of insulated itself. But the other thing was, yes, there were tariffs, but people kind of noticed them less, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this week, this is like a great example of tariffs and how they're going to impact people. And a kind of a weird story. So the Nintendo Switch 2 this week, or last week, I guess, at this point. Earlier this week, April 2nd. I don't even know what fucking day it is. April 2nd was Liberation Day. It was also the day that Nintendo was presenting Switch 2. They were doing a big like reveal, specs, pricing, games, all that kind of jazz. Funny enough, did you watch the presentation, Rio? Like, did you manage
No.
to? No, okay.
Because I was actually in the office that day, so I wasn't allowed to have fun. So
I know, but it's been like 8 days.
I know, but I just haven't had time to go back to it. So like,
Oh my God, well, make sure you watch it on my YouTube channel so that I get credit for it. But the thing that everybody kind of was panicking about after the initial like excitement, they didn't announce price in their actual direct, which they did when they first dropped the Switch.
Yeah.
So everybody was quite worried about like, oh shit, like, are they not dropping price for a reason?
Yeah.
So it turned out that yes, but it wasn't kind of what everybody thought, because everybody thought that tariffs was going to impact the Switch 2.
Yeah.
So it came out a couple of hours after the Switch 2 direct that the system itself was going to be $450 USD. $499 USD if you wanted to buy it with Mario Kart World. And that game would be discounted $30 USD, making those games about $90.
Yep.
There was a lot of confusion around like, okay, so is it just going to be that game that's $90 USD? Is Nintendo moving into this like $90 thing for exclusives? Like there was all kinds of questions around that. And then of course somebody else pointed out that like games are manufactured in Mexico, like physical games, and so that could be impacting it. And then people were arguing about, well, it's also $90 digitally though, so how does that make sense?
Yep.
And then other people were firing back that like it's Nintendo, everything's going to be like the same, and also why wouldn't they charge you $90 for a game if they can get away with it? Because of course.
Yeah, because money, right?
Because money, right? So all of this was happening. And then it came out that no, the $450 USD wasn't due to tariffs. It's due to like technology getting more expensive and the Switch 2 being comparable to a PS4. Okay, fine. It also came out because people were like, Trump's doing his Liberation Day tariffs today. Like, how is this going to impact it?
Yeah.
Turns out Nintendo wasn't worried because in 2019, they moved production of the Switch 2 to Vietnam. So meanwhile, we have all these people like losing their mind. The following day, on the 3rd, so we have the tariff announcement now. Internally, Nintendo's probably freaking out because Trump announced 46% tariffs on Vietnam.
Yeah.
So they've got their own shit going on because they're like, oh crap. Meanwhile, consumers all over the world, mostly in the US though, were freaking out.
Yeah.
Nintendo they're doing like a lot of promotion now, trying to like get people excited and like want to buy the Switch 2.
Yeah.
So they're doing these like, they released an app and we're doing like daily things. They did this like treehouse thing, what they call the treehouse presentation. The treehouse is like one of their shows. And they were showing all of the games. So like Mario Kart, Metroid 4, and a couple others. And people like generally would be like losing their mind and like super excited about these new games.
Yeah.
Instead, the YouTube chat was literally all drop the price, drop the price, drop the price. Like people were pissed about this.
Yeah.
Okay, fast forward. Now it transfers over to Reddit, and every Nintendo subreddit is drop the price, drop the price, drop the price.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Nintendo comes out and says, no, the $450 USD had nothing to do with tariffs.
Yeah.
But now we're pulling the pre-order dates.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Nothing from Nintendo. But by now, people understood 46% tariffs from Vietnam. This week, again, David Froome was on the Bulwark talking about how under these new tariffs, it's totally possible that a Nintendo Switch 2 would cost the American $660 just for the system, USD, which freaked people out. So then we had a response from consumers where half of Reddit was going, oh shit, we'll take the $450 price tag. Go back. But then we had this other really interesting thing. And I guess this is like one of the things I really wanted to get at with this is the other thing that happened is a lot of these Nintendo fans said like, this is crazy. We think that Nintendo should either A, eat the cost of the tariff, or B, include just for the American editions, things like upgrades for games because they're releasing patches to make Zelda look better, or a free game, or like all of this stuff. Which angered me because I was like, no, like you need to lay in the bed that you made. But more than that, as a global citizen, if we're talking about Trump and what Trump wants to do, and the fact that he has been like pushing like, oh, don't worry about it, other countries will eat the cost of my tariffs. If Nintendo caves on such a big ticket item like that, it basically gives Trump the incentive to be like, see, Nintendo did it.
And all of a sudden that like it's that ammo that he needs to be like, oh yeah, this is totally a win. Look, other countries are willing to pay for the tariff, which is what he wanted, right? Like when all this tariffs like talk first started, it was like, well, China will pay the tariff, well, Canada will pay the tariff, right? But like, no, like first of all, like I changed my shopping habits as soon as like all this tariff stuff like started becoming more real. I was like, you know what? Like I literally was at the grocery store the other day and I was like, well, I can buy American spinach or I can buy a Canadian cabbage. I'm gonna go buy a Canadian cabbage. I don't know what to do with it, but I can eat it and it's not American, right? So like I'm not gonna eat the cost of the tariff on that. And like, and why would Nintendo want to do that too? Because like they're still a private company trying to make money, right? Like the entire point of capitalism is your company makes money. So why are you demanding that Nintendo like eat the cost for you? This is the system that you want, right?
Right. So it's just but it gets better because now there was rumors on several gaming sites that Nintendo's considering eating the cost on the system. That's going to cause a problem, like we said, right? Going back to Trump being like, see, people just pay for it. Like, don't worry about it. We're going to be better. Sorry, I had to. Superstore was like, we substituted some orders on your grocery order. And I was like, they do the weirdest substitutions. Like this one was like, you wanted salted caramel cookies? Oh, we don't have that. We're going to send you white chocolate macadamia nut. This is not even remotely close. Like just don't put cookies in my cart.
Just don't even bother at that point. Just save me the $6.
No. But yeah, like that causes that problem, right? Because as soon as we see big companies like this cave, we have a problem. So then it got even more interesting. And this is where Canadian consumers should be concerned. Nintendo paused Canadian pre-orders. And they're being pretty tight-lipped on why. They did eventually come out and clarify that they were a little bit worried about like Americans coming up and like eating up our pre-orders like and cutting into their sales in Canada. Other people talked about the potential for smuggling, which I guess that's where we are. We're at a point where people are going to smuggle Nintendos into America. But another interesting thing has come up, and it's the confusion about whether or not Switches are going to ship from America to Canada and whether or not like how that's going to impact us, right? Like, so is the shipping line going to be like from wherever they're coming from, let's say Japan. So they're coming from Japan, they're going to America, and then they're going on to Canada, which would then, if we're the end stop, we wouldn't have tariffs. Or does it have to be like, is the supply chain Japan, US, and then Canada orders those from the US and that's how they come in? Because if that's the case, that system has been tariffed. So the big question remains is Canada about to be impacted by the tariffs? And this is a really interesting question because that leads to so many other products that Canadians consume daily, right? And then you pair that with the retaliatory tariffs that the Liberal government has put on the US, and we have a mess.
And like, I don't know, the way I think of it too is that like I mentioned this earlier too, like when I bought a sword from the Philippines, it went through an economic corridor in the States, so I didn't pay the American tax on it, I just paid the Canadian tax, which was 10%, which is like whatever. I paid an extra $40. It was kind of annoying, but like fine. But if I'm doing like, pay the tax when it goes into the States and pay the tax again when it comes into Canada, and like, that $450 USD becomes what, 660, and then it comes
it's 660 USD,
and then it comes
which
up
then becomes $915 Canadian. Ain't no Canadian paying $900 for a Nintendo product.
Yeah, I ain't paying for that shit. And like on the topic of like,
I'm a streamer and I won't buy Nintendo Switch 2 if it's $900.
Yeah, and like when we were talking about this, I literally just had the thought of like, you know what? Maybe that's how I'll pay for school, because I'll become a fucking Switch smuggler, right? Like I'll just buy a whole bunch of Switches here in Canada. I have a line of credit for a reason, and then just like go down to the States to like some like whatever shitty little flea market.
The problem is, Rio, you're brown.
Yeah.
Do you have any tattoos?
I'm going to get stopped at the border right away just because I'm brown. And
okay, but do you also have a tattoo?
Shit.
Do you have a tattoo, Rio?
Nope.
Okay, well, you might not get sent to El Salvador, but it's kind of a toss-up.
Yeah.
And I'm not really joking. So don't smuggle shit into the US because you're going to El Salvador.
Yeah, I know. I definitely just got myself put on a list right now because my phone is definitely listening to me. So.
Oh, like we're not already on a list.
Yeah.
Neither one of us can go anywhere near the US for at least 4.5 years.
Yeah. Hi, FBI agent Steve. Nice to hear from you.
Right. Okay. So let's move on. Tariffs bad. Good luck, America.
Yeah. And if you if you try to get a Switch and it costs $660, well, sucks to be you. I'm going to be up here with my Canadian $450 Switch with Mario Kart World, baby.
We should play. That'd be fun because you can do they have the new like making it easier to play online.
Yeah, and like I'm just very excited for the console in general.
It looks so good. Metroid looks amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I want Halo to come to the Switch.
Oh, I mean,
that's so good.
I
already played on the deck, and it's like Halo in handheld mode.
Oh, Halo with controller. Halo is just different. Right, like I play mouse and keyboard all the time. Don't get me wrong.
See, I've always played Halo.
Yeah,
like with a controller. When I first started playing Halo, as like a quick side story for everyone, I hadn't gamed in like years and years, and I was playing with my husband, and I had before that, just to give you a sense, I played with the Super NES controller, right? So it was just like the D-pad and like A and B, right? And then I'm like, what are these like stick things? And I'm trying to like learn to move and shoot at the same time. So I'd be like running with my gun in the air and like shooting up and like running into cliffs, shooting Rob. And he'd be like, dude, what the fuck? Yeah. Now I can actually play. But so I've always played Halo like with a controller. And so when Halo and BioShock, when I saw them for like the Steam Deck, I was like, oh my God, I can have Halo and BioShock handheld portably. Best day ever, Rio. I'm so weird. I'm like, ooh, Animal Crossing, and then I'm like, let's play BioShock.
Okay, straight up, BioShock's classic. I literally go back and replay it every couple of years. It's great.
Little Sisters gave me nightmares the first time.
I mean, I have a story that'll tell you like off air because it's really funny, and like I don't need the internet lording it over me for the rest of my life.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Okay, yeah, I'm definitely going to ask you when we hit stop. Okay. So the point is, good luck, America. I don't know what else to say. There's a few podcasters that are like live in New York and they're like streamers.
Yeah.
And they're just like, maybe we should just like drive to Canada and just like take out our spare tire and like hide some switches in there. Like, guys, you're now on a list. Like,
yeah, you just outed yourself talking about smuggling.
Morons. So moving on, there's just like two more topics I thought we should talk about. One's kind of like we'll end with it because it's a little bit of a silver lining and hilarious.
Yep.
But unfortunately, we have to dive into some more scary shit. This week, Trump signed 2 new executive orders that further weaponizes the Department of Justice, and not just in the way he's tried to do it
Yeah.
recently. This kind of changes everything. So he's targeting two people from his former administration. Chris Krebs, who is the former director of cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency in the US, and Miles Taylor, who is a former DHS official. The thing about Miles, I think it's less about what he did like job-wise and more about how he was the author of the Anonymous, which became not so anonymous later, op-ed warning about how Trump's crazy. Basically, he wrote that, I think it was back in 2018, maybe 2017. But at the time it was a big deal because nobody knew like who this author was, and it like kind of detailed how erratic Trump is.
Yeah.
And it did eventually come out that it was Miles Taylor. Chris Krebs has publicly stated many times that the 2020 election was not stolen and it was in fact secure.
Yeah.
So these two people have basically, in Trump's eyes, betrayed him.
Yeah.
So what were the orders? So the executive orders directed the DOJ to investigate them both for treason, which for some of our Canadian listeners might not understand that the guilty verdict for treason comes with the death penalty, not to mention like, you know, destroying somebody's life that way.
Yeah.
He also stripped them of their security clearance, which can impact them in the jobs that they're currently in. Obviously, so I guess like a good place to start here is that this is obviously something that the Trump administration is doing to scare the shit out of people.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Like, I kind of like ranted at you before about this, so I don't know if you want to start, but like, this is scary shit. This is like full on, like Russia scale. We're going to just fall into authoritarianism and you all can get fucked. Like, this is basically Trump poisoning his naysayers. Yeah. But using the justice system to do it because he knows that if he actually poisons somebody like Putin, it might actually be a problem. So why not use the justice system to kill his enemies?
Yeah. And that's really what it is, right? It's textbook. This is textbook authoritarianism once again. Like, you're specifically targeting people that have contradicted you and said, and like, you know, openly come out and criticized you as the leader and like contradicted what you say, therefore there are problems. So you're gonna accuse them of treason, have them investigated, and then like if the investigation just happens to be found like, yep, they're gonna lay down treason charges, all of a sudden you've just ruined these two people's lives at the very least. At most, you're gonna kill them, like in a public execution, like Saddam Hussein style, right? So like the fact, and this should be alarming.
By the way, is why the DOJ is supposed to be like separate from like traditionally separate from the president's office, which by the way, can we all now agree that relying on norms to keep people in check was stupid?
Yeah. Like
I get that the founding fathers of America didn't think that Americans were dumb enough to like vote somebody in like this, but like here we are, maybe have actual laws instead of norms.
Yeah. And like that's the other thing too, right? Is like the way that the U.S. Constitution, basically how the country was founded on like, well, we're going to assume the good nature of people.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Canada is the same way. Like if you read like the BNA, like the British North America Act, and then like the Constitution Act of 1982, it's very much written in the like, we're going to assume the good nature of people. But if you really,
democratic societies tend to lean heavily on norms.
Yeah. And I don't really like a fucking like weird stoner flashback, even though I haven't smoked weed in 2 years, where like I kind of ranted at ChatGPT about how like literally the rule of law is just a bunch of naked apes that like just happen to agree that we shouldn't be able to, we just happen to agree that a set of rules is the way we should govern ourselves, right? Yeah. And like, but it's so fragile literally because it's just a bunch of apes that have just decided this is how we'll govern ourselves, right? And that could absolutely go out the window really quickly, and it is. And you can see it in real time. And anyone who says like, oh, these two have Trump derangement syndrome, like you are literally living through the rise of authoritarianism, and you're saying that like we're the crazy ones for pointing it out. Like, And the fact, and
Yeah, I didn't read comments, but I saw that our last one had like 5 comments, and I was like, nope. And then I uploaded last week's episode.
Yeah. And like it's stuff like that, right? Where it's like, you can look out into the world and see, this is what's happening. And like Canadians looking into the United States and being like, you know what, you should probably really be alarmed by this. Or even like,
At least
Germans
it's
saying
protecting
that should really fucking alarm you, because it's Germany being like, yeah, you know what, we were the original Nazis, and now like fucking now they're back somewhere else and they're trying to come back in Germany again, right? So
Yeah, they're the official opposition in Germany right now.
yeah, which
How
is
the fuck did that happen, Elon Musk? I'm looking at you.
yeah, right. And then like so I saw another little bit on CBC, and I think this is worth talking about as well, that young male voters tend towards conservative politics. And a lot of the reason why is because they feel so alienated by like the more liberal and like the more like center and left of center type of politics, right? Like they feel more alienated by that. And then they had one guy who was I think he lives in Vancouver on CBC, and he was like, well, I was assaulted and the police told me they couldn't do anything about it. And I was like, and then me being someone who like practices a self-defense martial art was like, I mean, you were assaulted and you didn't do anything about it because you could and then you're saying that like the police need more power to do whatever. It's like, well, isn't the entire point of conservative politics and like the capitalist society and the individualistic society supposed to be you watch out for yourself? And you're complaining that there aren't enough social supports. So do you see the hypocrisy here where like you're demanding
No, he doesn't.
while you're advocating for a system where you advocate for yourself? And then meanwhile, my mindset is like, no, I'm advocating for social supports and I advocate for myself because I know, I can walk down the street and 99% of the time I'll be fine. But that 1% of the time, if something were to happen, at least I'm sort of prepared for it. Right?
Well, and I know that like you've told me in the past too that like, because we live in Rio and I live close to each other. Like,
yeah.
We used
literally
to live
10 minutes.
yeah, and we used to live even closer than that. And I would say like our neighborhoods, they're not perfect, but they're like safe neighborhoods generally in our city. And like Rio lived in the neighborhood, and there's been a few times where you've been like stopped by police officers.
Yeah, I would literally just be walking and they're like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm going home. I'm 15. I just got home from high school, right? Like, and that shit happens. And even if it's not that, like even just going downtown, like going to the pubs with my buddies or going to the bar or the club or whatever, like there have been times where it's like, I just walk in, I see something like I got a weird vibe, and I'm like, nope. And then like I find out on the news later, like the next day or like 2 days later, it's like, yep, there's a stabbing downtown. And I was like, good thing I left, because holy fucking shit.
That's so scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we see sort of the rise of. And like again, I hate that I go back to the Bulwark so often, but again, Sarah Longwell did some focus groups with young men.
Yeah.
And this was something they actually just also started this like, I only watched 2 episodes to be honest, because it's so cringy, I can't get through it. But they started doing a podcast with their main guy, Tim Miller, but his co-host is this like really smart Gen Z guy, and they talk a lot about like Gen Z issues.
Yeah.
And what he was saying and what Sarah found in her focus groups is like you were saying, like young men are feeling like they're not getting what's owed to them because of how far, basically because we've moved to a place where like they're not just getting the job because they're white, right? And we see this with Trump, how like, I mean, what, the next day after he got inaugurated was that plane crash where the military helicopter and the plane crashed in DC.
Yep.
And like before, like during the press conference, he was like, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on it, and basically said, well, it was probably like a DEI hire. And that's like resonating with young men. Like our economy sucks. Getting a job is hard. Like I'm a millennial. I've been out of work for like 2 years. I have a degree.
Yep.
The economy sucks.
Yeah.
And so like I can't imagine what it would be like for like, a Gen Z in their 20s trying to start their career as well, because I've been out there. I know how shitty it is.
Yeah.
And so that's like the right is able to like resonate.
Yeah. Well, and like, just in case anyone's like, oh no, it's like, it's only hard for them. Or like, so my girlfriend and I are both applying for new jobs, right? Like, we're just kind of like looking around and seeing what we can get. And like, it's hard for us too. And
Yeah.
again, like, so even with, you know,
And you have a lot of experience too.
Yeah, 7 years of experience, a degree, started a second undergrad, and now starting a master's. And like, it's hard for me to get a job, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know, I can't imagine how it's like. Well, actually, no, I can't imagine how it's going for her, because I know how it's going for her. Where like, she's applying around and like she'll get interviews, but then she'll just get ghosted after an interview.
Yeah.
Or like,
That's
you know,
the worst.
yeah, or like she'll apply for a job and she'll just never hear back. So like, what we're kind of looking at now is, I was like, okay, well, we kind of just, you know, and I like to joke about, like, this is our joke around the house, like, well, we're not millionaires yet, so we can't quit our jobs, because like we still have to pay rent and groceries and utilities and shit. But like,
well, it's funny you say that, because my husband applied for a job, and it kind of came down to him and one other candidate.
Yeah.
The company itself ghosted him, which, by the way, like, his friend works for, and so his friend was kind of horrified, because he was like, you're just not going to tell my friend he didn't get the job.
Yeah.
But he found out he didn't get the job because one of his coworkers announced that he was leaving and that he got a job like in our city. And so my husband like struck up a conversation with him. Turns out like he was the one that got the job. And so then my husband was like, well, I guess I'm not hearing back from them.
Yeah. And like, you know, stuff like that too, right? And like, you know, Rob was kind of lucky. He knew the person who got hired, right? But like 99% of the time, we don't.
You
and
don't
like,
know. Yeah.
Yeah. And even now, like, so even with like,
sometimes it's like 3 months later and they're like, you hear from them and you're like, that was like 3 months ago.
oh yeah, I mean, I remember when I hired you at our last
I know,
job,
I was just thinking about it. I was like, when she called me for the interview, I was like, who?
Yeah, it was like, what was it, 6 or 7 months after you applied?
It was
like,
7 months.
Yeah, and like, I had literally just become manager, like, what was it, 4 months before that. So
yeah. And I was like, who? And I had to like look it up. And she was like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and like, it's stuff like that, right? And like,
and then your boss wanted to do the interview like right away. And so like, legit, guys, one of my responses to the question was, I don't know, you called me yesterday and it was 7 months ago. I haven't even had time to go find the posting. And you were like, fair. Oh no, did we lose Rio again? He's had router problems. Oh, are you there?
Oh, I'm back. Yeah, I'm back. But
I was like, oh no, are we gonna have to start the router again?
Yeah, no, I'm back. It's just, it's being kind of hinky, and I'm guessing, like, if I had to guess, it's just the fucking, you know, it's just being shitty because it's Rogers, right? But yeah, that is literally how I ended up hiring you, even though, like, and there's something to be said about corporate practices and all of them fucking sucking. But like, there's also something to be said about just how hard it is out there. And that was even like kind of mid-COVID, right?
Yeah, that was right after, and I think that was part of the delay, right?
Yeah.
Because we had, basically the government had just started kind of the return to office stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I wasn't surprised, and I'm sure it would have been slightly quicker had COVID not been a thing. But the point is, it is super hard out there. So it's kind of the perfect storm for conservatives, which is sort of why, like, we saw that in Canada, right? Like, what Poilievre was doing was working. What's interesting about the Canadian elections, and Rio and I aren't going to get much into this because Jay and I will tomorrow in a podcast that's coming out. But people, it wasn't that they liked Poilievre. It was that the economic situation was so bad. We had, like, you know, the carbon tax, and people just hated Trudeau.
Yep.
And then Carney came in. He got rid of the carbon tax, which, by the way, side note, all of our gas stations around here are $1.35. I paid $1.14 in kind of like 10 minutes up the main highway by our places. That's like a huge difference.
Yeah. I paid $1.23 the day that it like came into effect. I paid $1.23 at Costco, and the gas station right by my house is like $1.30, or it's $1.29 now. So
ours are still $1.35 to $1.40 in your old area.
Oh yeah, and then actually,
they're screwing people.
Well, I was actually out at my office the other day too, and like, it's actually cheaper. I mean, it's Northeast Calgary, so everything's gonna be a bit cheaper, right? So
Yeah.
like I think they're around like 117. And I was like, I mean, I don't know how you got a
I
12
paid
cent difference there.
$1.14, but I had a 10-cent deal, like 10
Yeah.
cents off through Superstore. But like, it's insane. The point
Yeah.
is, this is all crazy, and Trump's just making it so much worse.
Yeah.
And now we have, and I guess like this is something that I've been struggling with, and I talked to Rob a little bit about it yesterday, and I actually talked to my therapist too. I'm having this like real hard time reconciling everything because things, I don't want to say that they're so much worse than before, but it just feels like things are so much worse than before. Like you have an American government that is disappearing people. They're signing executive orders to charge people with treason and, you know, potentially get the death penalty. And then you have people that like, obviously people vote in a way that like benefits them.
Yeah.
And so for them, it's all about the economy and like protecting their families. And so that's why a lot of people, like the non-like mega people, went to Trump, right? And I'm just having this like real hard time reconciling this idea of like, okay, well, you voted for the UCP. You're like a Polyev guy who's looking at Trump being like, I wonder if I could do that.
Yeah.
You voted for Trump. Like I recently cut off a friend in the US because he's just this like crazy mega person now, and was like, no, it's totally fine for him to be sending people to El Salvador. And I was like, what is wrong with you? And I'm having this really hard time existing. And like, not to turn this into like Nicole's therapy session, but like one of the things with you and I is like, we live in this like super conservative area too, not just like within the province of Alberta, but like our city it's like hugely conservative. And so I find myself like not really wanting to deal with people as much because I'm just so afraid that like something's going to come up and I'm just going to be like the vaccine story I told you, right? Like earlier. Things like I went to the dog park a couple weeks ago and this guy was like, oh, your dog's in a wheelchair. She's so cute. Can I pet her? Blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of just like, I glanced at his truck and it still had like a fuck Trudeau sticker on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and I was kind of rude to him after that. Just like, I don't have time for you people. So like, I'm really just having this like super hard time just like reconciling like policy issues and like authoritarianism and
like,
while trying to understand that people have perspectives and they don't necessarily want people to be sent to El Salvador, but
they have another perspective about how economics should be handled, right? And like actually, so Jay and I talked on the phone yesterday, and like I was telling you about that, and we were talking about that as well, where it's like, well, what a huge part of the struggle is with dealing with politics these days is that, you know, I'll pick on Canada as a very easy example. Like Facebook and Instagram don't host any sort of news content because they have to pay for it, right? So basically everything on Facebook and Instagram is either like shitty opinion pieces at best or like actual disinformation at worst. And like, so how do you deal with that? How do you get through to people with that? And like, how do you get through to like younger voters or like, you know, younger generation through TikTok when you're trying to do something like a 60-second video really quick? And what resonates a lot easier for obvious reasons is like really snappy axe attacks, you know, like Poilievre's kind of slogan-based campaigning, right? Because that you
his
can
problem is he can't figure out what slogan he wants to use.
Exactly. And like now he keeps changing it. And like, so now you have, but that's how you resonate with a lot of young voters now, is you do that kind of like really quick, like easily digestible, like not really nuanced policy. Meanwhile, what's happening now because of this election, actually, which is really interesting, I saw this on CBC, is more people actually going to traditional news media because you can't really get your news or like proper information on Facebook, Instagram, like any, like Reddit as another easy example, right? Like Reddit's a bit easier because you can still see it's an actual news site, but that doesn't change the fact that like, you know, you have the mob voting shit up and down, and then that can be manipulated, you know, just pay for a bot, right? Same thing with Twitter, you know, have a whole, or
I mean,
actually,
Twitter's a whole other problem.
oh yeah. And actually I want to mention this too, because I think this is really interesting to point out, is like you can buy a Facebook group with like 20,000 people in it already for something like $700. They did a piece on CBC about it. Oh, wow. And like, so you can buy that, rename the group to whatever you want, and then just start posting, you know, whatever bullshit you want that aligns with your political agenda. And then chances are some people will leave the group, but most will just stay in because they're like, well, they don't know about it. So it looks like a lot of people support the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state, when in reality, you know, here in Alberta, maybe a bit of a bad example because I've heard people talk about it, but like, you know, but in reality, most Canadians are opposed to it. And we've seen that happen nationally where people are like, nope, elbows up, fight out again. Like, this isn't us, it's us against Trump, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, like how we deal with that is really, that's the question that we have to like really figure out for like the modern era, I think. And especially with, you know, ChatGPT and AI becoming a thing and like becoming really good. Like I was using ChatGPT to write a cover letter the other day, and like it now gives you prompts to help support. Like if you don't know what to ask it, it gives you prompts to like tell you to help you figure out what you want to do with it. So like ChatGPT is now prompting itself, right? Like,
Jesus. I feel like, to bring it full circle, I guess, Americans are going to have to feel pain in the economy.
Yeah.
So like that Nintendo Switch is going to need to cost you $660 for it to get through your head.
yeah. And like, well, the thing is too, is like they're already feeling a lot of that pain. You know, like I said, eggs recently spiked at $11 a dozen. You know, $1 an egg is a lot of money. And like I was saying earlier too, with like minimum wage being like what, $7 in the United States, that's an hour.
It varies by state, but
yeah, but like an hour and a half of your work for a dozen eggs, right? And like
that's unsustainable.
Yeah, and when you start seeing that like more for the things that people want to buy, to like, you know, for that little sense of enjoyment you get in like your soon to be dystopian life in authoritarian America, right? Like, you know, your Switch costing $660 is just the start. Your Xbox and PlayStation suddenly become like $1,200. That truck you wanted to buy suddenly became, you know, went from like 100,000 or like 80,000 or whatever. I know here in Canada it's like they start at 80, right?
Yeah.
But that $100,000 truck you wanted to buy suddenly just became $150,000, right?
Yeah.
So like I think it'll be when it starts hitting those like those more luxury kind of goods. That's when like maybe we'll see a little bit more shifting in consciousness where it's like, oh shit, no.
At least like higher price goods, yeah, because you really see the price tag.
Oh yeah, like I remember for the longest time, like when COVID first started, and I was like, I've mentioned this before, I could buy a loaf of bread for $2, and then like I remember looking at the receipts during COVID because like I was going through like an old like box of receipts I had, and you can literally see the price go like $2, $2.50, $2.50, $3, $3.25, $3.25, $2.50, right? And like, you can see it go up and down, kind of like based on what was happening at the time, and then now it's $5 for a loaf of bread at Safeway, right?
Yeah. Great.
So yeah, all that is to say is like with what's happening now and like how do you get out of it? Like a lot of it is like, and like I know people are gonna hate me for this, but I think a lot of it is just properly regulating industry. And like if you had like ChatGPT, just as an example, because I'm gonna pick on AI because that's the shit I've been writing about for the last year.
Your egg thing is actually a perfect example of that, like regulating industry. In the US, you have like millions of birds in a farm.
Yep.
In Canada, because like Canada's not immune to the bird flu.
Yeah.
We've had
diseases don't give a shit.
Yeah, right. But the reason our eggs are still normally priced is because of the regulation on that industry. They're not allowed to have millions of birds in one area together, which protects against such outbreaks. You know, science that Trump's also just disregarding.
Yeah. And like same thing with like our dairy industry too, right? And like I wanted to mention the AI thing because like if there has to be some kind of regulation on your technology companies, right? Because like these are basically the kingmakers of, you know, the early 2000s now, where an election can be decided on social media almost. So like you need to have that some kind of control to make sure that like no, they don't control the narrative. It has to be the people and like the citizens still being able to control, you know, what's happening in the country, right? And what we're seeing with like all this tech bro shit happening in the United States and like Doge and all that is like it's an actual undermining of all that. Like you elected Donald Trump expecting him to be the elected official, but now you have Elon Musk running the show through Doge.
Co-president.
Like, co-president, right? Like, you know, you've just undermined your system by having that happen. So yeah, I don't know. Now I'm depressed. So
do you want to end on like good news? At least kind of good news?
Sure.
Okay, so the last thing to talk about is SCOTUS's ruling this week on due process.
Cool.
So one of the cases from El Salvador made it to the Supreme Court. There was a father from Maryland that was in the country. He's in the country legally. He went through the court process, basically got something similar to asylum. And then he got picked up in an ICE raid and sent to El Salvador. Now, the Trump administration, or Trump regime, I guess I should say, has said, like, this was an administrative error and they shouldn't have been sent, but, like, can't get him back. Sorry, we sent him to a foreign country.
Yes.
So this made it all the way up to the Supreme Court this week, and in a 9-0 ruling. Now, this is a big deal because the Supreme Court is heavily leaning conservative, because it has, like, more than half of the Supreme Court are, like, Trump appointees. Yeah. So 9-0 they ruled unanimously that they have to try to get him back. Like, they have to actually enter into talks with El Salvador to get this person back who was wrongfully deported and deported without due process. And then they also, in their written statement, said that all deportations without due process are unconstitutional. Yeah. And they've said that everybody waiting to go needs to have court rulings. So this is also going to give an opening to, for example, the lawyer of that hairdresser that was also sent down to El Salvador. Of course, the not so silver lining in this is that Trump. Okay, so I guess worst case scenario, Trump tells them to go fuck themselves and you are now officially in authoritarianism. Yep. Or, which is more likely to happen, Trump will say, well, we tried, but El Salvador won't give them back. Meanwhile, El Salvador's president knows that Trump doesn't actually want them back. And they have openly collaborated with each other in like public via Twitter in the past. Like when there was that lower court ruling about turning the plane around, but it was in international waters and Trump just continued to let it go. And then the El Salvadorian president tweeted out, oops, it's already here. Fucked up. Yep. So that happened. And then in another kind of amazing but also infuriating case, a small town in Texas that Trump won by 40 points in, had a family of 5 picked up by ICE and they were sent to a detention facility. Yep. The town, I guess, collectively lost its shit. They rallied, they protested, they demanded releases. Teachers spoke out in classrooms. It was so much pressure on the Republican senator there that family actually did get released and returned to their town. Good. So there is some silver linings here that people are like, holy shit, we didn't put you in charge so that you could disappear people. We put you in charge to fix the economy and stop illegal border crossings.
Yeah. And actually, on the topic of like people protesting, I saw there's a picture on Reddit the other day from a protest against the Trump government in Utah, which of all places, like Salt Lake City, Utah is not somewhere I would expect to protest against Trump.
No.
But like, I think it's worth mentioning because it's not something that you're seeing in like mainstream news media, but it's something you're seeing on like Reddit and like Facebook and stuff, which again kind of says a lot.
On podcasts.
Yeah, on podcasts, right? And it says a lot that like that's kind of what's happening now. That, you know, you're having these protests and people are saying like, no, this isn't what we signed up for. You know, we elected you for another thing and what's happening is not that, right? And like kind of bringing it a little bit closer to home. So I have a buddy whose parents just came back. They're snowbirds. They came back from Arizona this week. And like, you know, they were saying like, yeah, no, we don't want to deal with this immigration shit. And like, I was actually going to go and try and visit them this week and be like, I kind of want to get your perspective because you're snowbirds. And like, you know, I'm not a snowbird. I'm fucking 30. So because I want to know a little bit more about like what they dealt with down there and what they're seeing from even their American neighbors, right? So yeah, the fact that people are still willing to stand up against it says a lot. And the fact that you're not seeing it anywhere on like mainstream news media coverage or like Fox, quote unquote.
Well, the fact that
media.
the mainstream media is still acting like this is normal is infuriating. Like the fact that the phrase disappearing people is entering the conversation should scare the shit out of everyone. Like if this was Democrats doing this would be just run 24/7 on Fox News. And rightfully so.
Yeah. But like, because it's Donald Trump and a Republican, and like we're dealing with the Republican House and Senate now, it's just me.
Well, and then on the other side, right? Like places, I mean, MSNBC is like, something different in and of itself. And I think
they're like a weird, I don't know how to describe it.
But like CNN, for example, CNN is like still kind of acting within norms, right? And like the way they're describing things, like they're reporting on it, but there isn't really the urgency. It's almost like reporters are holding themselves together while saying the phrase disappearing people.
Yeah.
And it's just insane. Like everybody should be scared.
Yeah.
Every podcaster, like I know Pod Save America touched a little bit on this, like they're kind of wondering if they're suddenly going to get disappeared. They have a gay guy on their podcast, so like
it's entirely possible that he just suddenly vanishes one day,
right? Or like Tim Miller, who's like used to be a Republican and is now like a traitor because he's a never Trumper. Like,
so, and actually, this is again bringing it back home. I have a buddy who was planning to go to Vegas, like, and then now even his mom, who's like hardcore conservative, is like, no, don't go. And he's like, yeah, I don't think we can go anymore. I'm like, dude, based on the conversations we've had in text, you shouldn't be going in general, right?
You definitely shouldn't take your phone.
Yeah. And I was like, if you want, dude, I can wipe like a couple of my like one of my phones from like 2012.
What planet are we on that we need burner phones to go to the US?
Yeah, burner phones from like 2012 before any of this shit happened, right?
I wonder if we'll see like a higher stats of like people going to the US with like old Blackberries.
Well, so my buddy's actually really smart because his is literally just a fucking clamshell phone. And I was like, God, I should just do that. Just go buy like a crappy old clamshell and that's my phone. You can text me and call me. That's all I need.
Just find somewhere else to travel. It's like how I was super excited that I can go to Universal Studios in Japan.
Yep.
I can go to a Harry Potter world in Japan.
Yep.
Well, on that note, I'm tired and I'm depressed. Do you have any like last thoughts that you didn't get to rant about?
I think I'm kind of good for the day. I'm depressed too, so thanks, Nick. Great start to my Saturday morning.
I'm always happy to depress you.
Yeah, it's
okay,
fine.
guys, we're under 2 hours today. Go us.
Awesome.
Stay tuned. If you don't already know, Jay and I are doing elections coverage this month. So I'm suscepting myself to weekly podcasts on the Canadian election, which somehow Rio got out of, and I'm still mad at him. We will be filming that tomorrow, and then it'll be out in the next couple of days. So it's totally possible these podcasts will drop back to back. So watch that, see what's going on. Make sure you vote at the end of the month. January, April 28th. April 28th is voting day. Advance polls open on the 18th, which is Easter weekend.
Yep.
So you're off. Go vote.
I'm going to register to vote right after this because I had to update my address and I haven't registered to vote yet. So now it's time.
Oh my God, go do that. Not that it matters in our area.
Yeah, not that it matters, but I'm going to still exercise my
80%.
democratic right.
Oh my God. Okay, one last story and then I'll let everyone go. I watched your old MP and my still MP.
Yep.
He was door knocking. He stopped, looked at my house, and skipped it. But I was in my living room and saw it, and I went out and I was like, Tom.
Hey, remember me?
Remember me? Oh my God, I hate you. So that was really funny that his volunteers just like skipped my house.
Yeah. I actually still haven't seen anyone for my new MP or any of the candidates.
It's
I'm also not surprised
here,
but,
right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know Jason Kenney used to like the last Harper win, he was on TV, and I'll never forget this. They asked him what his numbers were in his riding, and he literally said, "I don't have to watch that."
Yeah.
And it was like, dudes,
Yep.
Alberta, you're really okay with this?
Yeah, like it's almost as if like our elections are kind of a sham in Alberta because it's always the same, but at least provincially,
Right.
damn, it's kind of
Well, and
changing.
federally, what's been interesting to watch too is that we're choosing between like one conservative and another conservative.
Yeah.
I had a friend come over and she was like, "Nick, I need you to explain this." And by the time I was done explaining it, she was like, "Oh, so there's one conservative who is an economist and ran 2 banks as a banker, or this angry goblin." And I was like, I've never heard anybody describe Polyev as an angry goblin before, but that's amazing. And that was one of three friends I saw this week that was asking about the difference between Mark Carney and Polyev. So the point is, go read news, get a bunch of different news media from different sources, and then go vote on April 28th, because it is important to have your say. So
don't get your news from Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, don't, but also like kind of don't get it from Facebook and Instagram.
Yep.
Go to like, I don't even care. Like go to CBC, go to the National Post, just like
go to Global.
Yeah, like whatever, just somewhere, please read up on the actual policies, which unfortunately, good luck, because they're very confusing because they're basically the same. With that said, we will see you in a couple of weeks. And if you're listening to the Canadian edition, you'll have to listen to me again like tomorrow. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.